Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is Chris, and of course, this is my channel, Barn on 11970, and as always, I appreciate you guys taking the time to check out my video. Alright, guys, I get some interesting comments on my last video because I bought some silver early this morning. It's actually the first purchase I've made since silver was in the upper 19s, and a couple people were asking some questions, and I want to just make it clear because apparently some people don't watch many of my videos, and especially, like, for example, Silver Futurist, I appreciate your comment, but I notice the only time you ever comment on my channel is when you have something kind of more on the negative side to say. I mean, when I do my positive videos, you're never around, and considering the last comment I saw of yours was on my famous trolls page instead of my own, sometimes I kind of question what it is that you're trying to drive at. But, I mean, I'm not making a big deal out of it because it really doesn't matter to me. But to answer your question about how most people's instincts are wrong, I have to make perfectly clear, and people need to understand or understand this, that I don't worry about what other people do and don't do. When I do things, it's because I say this is the time that I feel is right for it. I don't question it, and I don't worry about price. This is the thing I guess some people don't understand. Since day one of me purchasing my silver, I've always said it is all about protection for the future. It is insurance. Now, there are lots of insurance companies out there. Some have a little bit higher price. Some have a little bit more reasonable price. Let's say, for example, you go and buy car insurance, and you find out that you spent $100 more than you had to because another place was selling it for cheaper. And then, God forbid, 6 months later you get into a car accident, and it ends up at somebody else's fault, and you get $100,000 out of it. After they pay for your car, after all the damage and medical bills or whatever, you end up with a profit of $100,000. Do you really care in the long run that you might have spent an extra $100? Probably not what's on your mind at that point. And that's the same thing with me with silver. Because there was another person that said, you know, this is not the right time to buy. Silver could go down to $16.50. Let's assume that happens, and it does go down to $16.50. Well, let's say in a year to 2 years from now, silver goes back up to 30. Let's say in 5 years, silver goes up to 150 an ounce. Does it matter that you bought it at 17 or 16.50 at that point? I mean, people always speculate. And that's the name of the game in this. You could read every chart you want. I've always said there are always variables. And you don't want to be like how people were during Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy, hardly anyone prepared for, because normally, especially around here in New York, we don't get hurricanes very often. So very few people prepare for things. But when it hit, that's when all of a sudden everybody went to go get gas, everybody went to go get food, and by the time they got there, they were either spending 24 hours online to get whatever little amount of gas they could get, provided it was even available. Because a lot of places you waited online and found out, oh, we don't have any more. Or you go to the food stores and the shelves are empty. So if the average person wants to wait for silver to get to a certain point, and then all of a sudden the opportunity is no longer there, because people also have to understand this when it comes to the price of silver. The lower it goes, the higher the spot price people are going to sell it for, because they have to make up for their losses. And I picked up silver this morning. Was it the lowest price of the day? No. But you know what? I bought a 100-ounce bar, and people ask where I got it from. I went to Gold Mart. I tend to buy from them a lot. They take a little bit longer to ship, but it's not like I need it this second anyway, so I don't care about that. But I bought a 100-ounce bar at 50 cents over spot. So somebody else could buy it where, let's say silver goes to $16.50, and you buy your silver and it's $2.99 or $3.99 over spot. Did you save money then? Because I think I would have actually gotten it for a cheaper price, even though it technically was higher. So people don't factor in those things. And that's perfectly fine, because, I mean, I don't know how many videos I could make that say, you do what you want, you trust your own instincts, you don't care what anybody else thinks. Because I'm not buying silver to sit there and speculate and say, oh, tomorrow I'm going to make $1 million. No, I'm buying it because, as you see, how bad this country wants to start a war over in Syria and over with Russia and try and defend the U.S. petrodollar so they can keep scamming the world. Tensions are running high. And I've always said in my silver videos, there are always variables that people cannot factor in until they happen. It's like the people who lived in Pompeii, where they lived there for thousands of years, generation after generation, of living under an active volcano that never erupted. And people could say all the time, well, it didn't erupt yesterday, it didn't erupt today, my grandfather, it didn't erupt for him, his grandfather, it didn't erupt for him. Well, if it erupted the next day, which eventually it did, the people died in their sleep and where they stood, because once it erupted, there is no escape. So I've always said it's better to be 5 years too early than 5 seconds too late. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, you know, you're not going to be able to get silver. Of course you can get it, but at what price? What price are people willing to sell it? And you could look, like if you go on Goldmart where I got my 100-ounce silver bar, a lot of their products are already sold out, and the others range between $2.99 and like $3.49 over spot. So if it goes down 50 cents and you're spending $4 over spot, did you save money? So, you know, people are always going to have this opinion of, oh, you did wrong or you did this. I didn't do wrong if it's what I wanted. I'm adding to what I already have. I felt it was the time to purchase, and that's what I did. Why some people are so adamant of telling someone else what they did was wrong makes zero sense to me. But they're entitled to that opinion, and they even, like a silver futurist, you know, like I said, he only tends to message me when there's something on the semi-negative. I mean, he's not a troll, he's not a hater. I'm not trying to suggest that. But he's never here when anything's positive to say. But because of the fact he's at least respectful, and the other person saying about the 1650, they didn't say, oh, you're an idiot or anything. So I have no problem with them voicing their opinions. But make no mistake, I buy it because I'm adding to my position, I'm using it for insurance, and if some kind of situation happens where gold and silver starts skyrocketing, or even goes back to 25, goes back up to 30, which is not impossible, I already have it. I won't have to worry about trying to scramble to get what I can then. Because it's like any situation in the world. One day everything's perfectly fine and everything's perfectly normal, and then one day you wake up and there's a tsunami. Or there's a economic crash like in what happened in the 1920s, the Great Depression. I don't think people prepared for that because one day they woke up and all of a sudden things just happened. I bet people that were living in Hawaii in the early 1940s were not expecting all of a sudden the Japanese fleet to come and bomb the living crap out of them. So I understand why people watch charts, and it's good to do that. But there are always variables. And we saw what happened with palladium when it went from like 700 to 900 because of what was happening in Russia. Well, that hasn't stopped, has it? They're making deals. China and Russia have been making deals to get away from the petrodollar by using their own currencies or gold for oil. You don't think that's eventually going to affect the U.S. dollar? And right now they're talking about how the euro is about a 1.25 now against the dollar. And they're already talking about their own versions of quantitative easing in Europe, which means they're going to try and cause more problems with the dollar. So it could strengthen for a little while or it could weaken. This is all based on manipulation. So unless you're part of the manipulation, you'll never know. So if all of a sudden silver in 3 months or whatever goes down to 15, which is definitely possible, I'll just add more to my position. So anyway, I don't know how many times I could say that I do things because I want, and it's never wrong. If you make a decision and you believe in it in your gut that it's the right decision, then it doesn't matter what everybody else says is wrong. I don't care what anybody else says. But I address it because it's definitely a legitimate question. So hopefully that addresses it. Some people will not be satisfied by the answer. They're just going to sit there and laugh, or they're going to sit there and say I'm wrong. Well, like I said, if silver goes back up to 30 or 40 or 50 or goes even higher, do you really think I'm going to care that, oh, well, I could have bought it for $16.50, but I bought it for $17.17? at that point, you really just, you're stretching it. So anyway, like I've always said, you do what you want to do, and you do based on your own instincts. They could be wrong, but I don't feel they ever are wrong, because if you look at things for the future and the grand scheme of things, you'll always do the right thing. And if you make a mistake, you learn from it and you move on. Thanks for watching. Peace.